Good morning, and welcome to the Alameda Connection on KCSM HD2. I'm your host, Scott Piehler. Wherever you turn in Alameda, the arts are alive. Here on the Alameda Connection, it's been my pleasure to introduce you to the Tap Dancing Christmas Trees, Rhythmix Cultural Works, Radium Runway, the Altarena Playhouse, and the Frank Betts Center. There is an organization in Alameda bringing the arts alive in multiple locations. Join me this morning when my guest will be Tara Pilbrow, the Executive Director of the West End Arts District. Founded in 2015 as the organization behind the annual beloved Blues, Brews, and Barbecue Festival, the West End Arts District believes in nurturing a strong and vibrant community through the arts, with an eye that goes well beyond Alameda. In fact, they're positioning the West End of Alameda as a regional hub for the visual and performing arts. From Webster Park, the former Healing Garden, to Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, and new events like the upcoming Ocean Photographer of the Year installation at Alameda Point, West End Arts District is truly creating vibrant art experiences right here in Alameda. That's Tara Pilbrow, Executive Director of the West End Arts District, my guest this morning on the Alameda Connection on KCSM HD2. Good morning, Tara, and welcome to the Alameda Connection.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's start with congratulations on your recent Alameda Star win for Best Exhibition of 2025 for In Plain Sight. How did that exhibition come about?
In Plain Sight was the end of a year of climate-focused arts programming. We were approached by the City of Alameda, who were excited to apply for a large-scale funding opportunity. So from time to time, Bloomberg Philanthropies offer a $1 million grant for temporary public arts programming. And any mayor can apply. So this goes out to cities through mayors. So the City of Alameda wanted to apply for that money, and they approached West End Arts District and Radium Presents. We want to collaborate with you to apply for this program. It has to focus on one specific social justice issue. What are we going to apply on and how are we going to do it? And we went away and came back and effectively said, we think that A, we're most interested in, and B, Alameda has the greatest strength of application if we talk about sea level rise and
Certainly.
Climate issues. Being, as we have said 8 million times over the 2 years since, Alameda is California's most densely populated island.
Is it?
People don't know that.
Fits
Perfectly into why we're a little bit concerned about sea level rise.
Sure.
We worked with the city and put together a proposal for 2 years of programming, all focused around sea level rise. This was also inspired by the fact that the city of Alameda has a really strong investment in sustainability. We prepared 2-year pitch, $1 million. I had all kinds of crazy ideas about wonderful things I was going to do with that much money. We were one of the 17 finalist cities. We were the next smallest city in the list was Salt Lake City. So we were in there with the big boys. And they came back and they said, we're not going to give you the money, but we really loved your proposal, and here's $100,000. So we then rethought the 2 years into 1 year, rethought the partners to bring in Rhythmix, who were also doing a lot of climate-focused work, and we proposed Rising Tides, which was a 1-year climate arts program. And that broke down into 3 parts, the last of which was In Plain Sight. We worked with Photoville, which is a New York-based photo nonprofit who do a massive festival in New York every year. They came on both to help us curate a photography exhibit that was climate-focused, and to help us figure out how to set up a photography exhibit that's going to sit outdoors for a month that people can wander through. And it was out for the month of kind of April, May last year. What I really learned doing it, a photography festival, once you build the thing, serves as this wonderful kind of basket. There's this space that people want to visit. There is a kind of central location. And on top of that, you can put all kinds of programming and invite all kinds of people in. Once it's there for a month. And there's all kinds of different reasons that you can bring people in. So you can host speakers, events, and family festivals and all kinds of things. Also helps to bring in different groups of people because we can, touch on different themes that are related to the photography festival. I think we had 400 students come through on school visits to that one. So there's lots of different ways of approaching it, which makes it a really great vessel for kind of getting the mission and the message out.
Here's a very silly question.
Go on then.
When you are sitting around with other people from the West End Arts District, how do you refer to your organization in shorthand?
Weed.
Weed?
Weed.
Okay. Weed's mission: we connect artists, community members, funders, and audiences to create exciting art experiences that foster a vibrant community and position the West End of Alameda as a regional hub for the visual and performing arts. What does that mean to you?
I think West End Arts District was founded very much around Webster Street and still has a big focus on that business district. But what really, I think, inspires a number of us, the need for Alameda Point to transform into something and the potential for that to be a really exciting space for the arts. If you look at its trajectory, it needs the arts. But I honestly believe that what will help transform that space into a kind of revitalized, dynamic district is fundamentally the artists being there first and doing that seeding work.
A little history of Weed. It started 2015, but primarily for Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, right?
It was founded by Sandra Russell, who is the owner of the Fireside Lounge. They started Blues, Brews, and Barbecue. It was an entirely volunteer-led organization. I, as I say, got on board. I actually applied for the first ever round of public art funding from the city of Alameda.
And that was Animate Alameda?
That was Animate Alameda, exactly. Okay. I was at the time running a dance company. So we worked with Sandy and really invested in growing the organization, growing the scope of things we were doing. You know, we've gone from really a festival, which was bringing the street to life, to trying to be an organization that supports arts across the West End.
Let's take a look at Blues, Brews, and Barbecue. This is the 9th annual. It started in 2015. That leaves out a few years. There was a move and there were interruptions. So when did it move off of Webster, and how much, was it all just COVID interruption, or were there any other skip years?
3-year COVID hiatus, which should have been a 2-year COVID hiatus. The year that we went to bring it back, I think we'd announced it. We'd certainly applied for permits and everything. We were maybe a month and a half out, I want to say. It turned out that Webster Street is state highway. It's not run by the city of Alameda, It's run by the state. There's an application, which is a 6-month application, blah, 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 which prior to COVID, the city had always done for us. But we didn't know that. During COVID, whoever had been doing that for us for however many years, obviously left city staff.
Got it.
2 years later, we came back. About a month and a half before the program, somebody said, but you haven't got this permit. And it takes 6 months to apply for said permit. So it was like, okay, well, this is not happening. And then the next year we were like, this seems very complicated and maybe we'll get to the California State Highway application, but let's move it to the park. So we did officially what was going to be 1 year in the park. And then there were like hundreds of people on the grass. Nobody really wanted to move it out the park after that. We try and loop in Webster Street as we can. So that's why we've had 2 years now where we end the festival with a procession.
Yes.
The process is back up to Webster Street so that at the end you're still on Webster Street. But the reality of the ease and the comfort of being in a park space rather than being in a street space, it's just so popular and people love it so much. It feels like it would be ridiculous. Also, some of the spaces that we used on Webster Street are now closed. So the logistics of taking it back to Webster Street are more complicated than they were. And
it has become one of the events that both in the Piehler household and in the household of my daughter and son-in-law, as soon as it's announced, it goes on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, it is deeply, deeply loved. And I think people love it being in the park as well. So it wouldn't be me that changed it. I'm like, no, you got to follow popular opinion. There comes a moment where it's like, people like it. Keep going.
My first exposure to West End Arts was a fairly impressive one because I got out here in February of 2022. 2 months later, the waterfront park opening. That was quite the shindig. You can tell people that, depending on their opinion of me, you are either to blame or to credit for the fact that my wife and I came here and stayed, because that was one of the great introductions when we went, you know, we might have found our people here.
That is very cool. I will take that. Thank you very much.
Aside from Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, which everybody tends to know, what other events would people know West End Arts for?
Blues, Brews, and Barbecue is the only thing we do every year. We started a sister event to Blues, Brews, and Barbecue at one stage called Fiesta Alameda.
Let's jump into that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Because it was monstrously successful, and then poof.
It's monstrously successful. It's unfortunately not quite financially monstrously successful. Okay. So Blues is able to pay for itself. Depending on the year and the amount of sun we have and you know the number of people that turn up, it sometimes brings money back into the organization, which is amazing. Fiesta might have got there eventually, but it was a long way off. We had a bad year where we'd grown considerably, and so we sort of budgeted for the growth, and then the growth didn't happen quite at the level that you were at. And the difficulty, I think, with Fiesta is the Blues, for example, relies on two things. It relies on alcohol consumption. So all of that beer is donated to us. We are able to sell it. Basically, the alcohol is what's paying for the event. Fiesta, what I loved about it was that it ended up being a little bit more arts focused and a little bit more family focused. People weren't drinking the same amount of alcohol as they were at Blues. The other one is sponsorship. Losing Fiesta was a financial decision
Weed is really about community. That bleeds into economic health. I had Rachel Campos on actually last year, and we talked about economic benefit of the arts because people say, oh, the arts. And you go, no, here's the dollars.
Oh, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
let's talk about that a little bit.
The biggest one is just bringing people into the island. The last couple of years, we have about 6,000 people that come in for blues over the course of rising tides. We had 60,000 people come out to watch the Bandloop performances, for example, in Alameda Point. Pure and simple, people come onto the island. They're not necessarily from the island, or they've gone out for the evening and then they spend their bucks elsewhere. And that's really, really helpful. I want you to imagine like places you visited. When you imagine these places, or very often the thing that sticks in your head is your experience in some way of arts and culture when you were in them. As an economic driver, it's both a sort of short term, I turn up and I bought lunch, and then it's a long term, I turn up and I went to, the waterfront park and it was wonderful. And then I moved to Alameda and I stayed here and that's all great. And in Alameda Point, there's also a question of businesses that come here and they want to bring their staff here and they want them to have a good life. And a lot of that is through the arts and culture. And so how do we make that space somewhere that people want to live and work? A lot of that is through the arts and culture.
Big event this year, Ocean Arts 26. Let's talk about that because that looks to be quite something.
So we have one half of it coming up in April, which is the Ocean Photographer of the Year exhibition, which is huge and ambitious. And somehow we have managed to pull together in miraculous ways that I could talk for a long time about the stress and the maybe and the, oh my gosh, but it's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. The other half of Ocean Arts 26 is Deep Dive, which was a project that I started in November. So we had some funding from the city to do, call it R&D, like a first version of Deep Dive. And we did that in November. Effectively, the long-term project was to bring together projection, dance, and music. I started with the projection and the music because despite being a dancer, I know that the dance is really expensive. You and I were talking about Liz Taylor. I was working with Liz's son, who is a visual artist.
Okay.
But he spends most of his life underwater, unsurprisingly, and has incredible photography and video footage of all kinds of different places around the world.
I'm not sure, but I think the entire Taylor family has gills.
Absolutely. This is the thing. When you work with Taylor, you realize that he was so much more fundamental to the project. Taylor was doing the projected images with a really simple storyline where we were just trying to have you dive in at kelp forest level and keep going down to the deep, deep, dark depths of sort of Monterey Canyon, which is one of the deepest places in the world. We were doing the project in the REAP Climate Center, which is a space I wanted to celebrate anyway because their work, I don't know if you've had Jonathan on.
In fact, he was just on.
Perfectly lined up. Look at you for organizing. So we were projecting from inside REAP onto the side wall of the Posey 2 building. So that was like chapter 1. My stated goal at the beginning of this year was to have chapter 2 by the end of this year. I can now publicly announce this on the radio. I don't think I'm going to make it.
All right, fair enough.
So that's still coming, but a little bit later. Ocean Photographer of the Year is a collection of marine photography curated by Oceanographic magazine. And they run a competition every year. They bring in over 15,000 submissions and they curate 116 images. So when I was first trying to get very creative about how we were going to pull this budget together, given that we're trying to do things on the scale of how we were trying to do it last year, I'm going to approach the British consulate because surely they want to help me do this. And surely I must have some contact somewhere in the British consulate, which I did via various routes, managed to get my foot in the door. So as part of SF Climate Week, we have the British representative for climate from the British government coming. I know, big flashy names. So that is exciting in its own right. And then on the 24th, we actually open the exhibit with a kind of gala evening. Bay Photo, who are a photography printing company, they are printing all of the images for the exhibition. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary.
Ah, perfect.
So the opening night is their 50th anniversary party. And then we are open for 4 weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, all day, general public admission. And then we have a series of evening events, Thursdays and Friday night, really diverse range of different things going on in the evenings.
And you've added a local element.
One of the things that we loved about In Plain Sight, we were able to work with 2 different local galleries. Bay Area Photography Collective curated one of the containers, and the Harvey Milk Photography Center in San Francisco curated one of the containers. And then we had an exhibition that was also done by the City College of San Francisco with their photography department. So we were able to bring in partners and say, you can have a bit of space. Obviously, with Ocean Photographer of the Year, that was more complicated because the exhibit itself is 116 images and it comes as a package. But we still wanted to open up somehow a little niche for local photographers to get involved. Nick Winkworth, who is actually both on our board and the president of the Bay Area Photographers Collective, and Jan Watton, who is the owner of the Greyloft Gallery. They are curating somewhere between 80 and 90 entries from local photographers, and Nick and Jan will be doing the hard work of selecting roughly 20 of them. We're putting all of this wonderful stuff into Building 41.
For those who are semi-familiar, that's walk out of Almanac and walk across the street.
This is exactly. But if you're walking into the space we're going to be using, you're going in the other side. So if you know where the Naval Air Museum is, you'd be coming into that same building from the Naval Air Museum side. We're going to be using various different bits of the building. And then there's kind of one bigger room at the end. We're calling it the Bay Perspectives Gallery. Separate that bit off to have both the local photography. And then also we've been working with a group called Sailing Science Org, which is a group of people who currently have exhibits that they take into kind of festivals or schools.
I think I've seen them at the Women's Sailing Seminar.
Exactly. They basically build kind of hands-on exhibits for people to understand the science of the ocean.
You talked about what attracted you initially to West End Arts, but there's a big difference between I want to work with these people and I want to be the executive director. What flipped that switch?
When I first came to Alameda and I had my crazy idea about, I want to do a site-specific dance festival, I knew nobody, like literally nobody. I'd been here for maybe 2 months. Somebody introduced me to one dancer who lives on the island, and the dancers are all pre-connected, so they also introduced me to other dancers who live on the island, and I'm going to all of them going, hey, this is a site-specific dance festival. And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? And one of them says to me, you should speak to the mayor. Bear in mind that I have only ever lived in like the center of very large cities. Like I've lived in London and Paris and New York and Hong Kong, but like in the middle of things. So when somebody says you should speak to the mayor, I'm like, I can do that? That's a thing you can do? I'm like, really? So a couple of weeks later, I find myself in the mayor's office going, we need a site-specific dance festival. And Trish, who at the time was mayor, was like, sure we do. She said to me, you should speak to Rachel. Rachel at the time was working for the Site A development out in Alameda Point. So her job was organizing festival and events in Alameda Point. And the rest is kind of history, as they would say. Like Rachel and I have worked together very, very closely on everything we do. And I think there is a power dynamic there that has kept us both going.
Let's turn to Tara for just a minute, because somebody should option your journey for a film. Born in Hong Kong, where are your parents from?
They're both British.
So born in Hong Kong, you studied dance and Chinese studies, Oxford, China, then to New York, 10 years in Paris, back to the UK in 2011, then to Alameda in 2017. Does your passport have any room left for stamps?
Luckily, they refreshed passports, and in Europe, they stopped stamping them. That helps a lot. I come from a family of people who go all over. So both my parents are British. They both come from deeply expat families, and they moved out to Hong Kong. They actually met at university and moved to Hong Kong for 2 years, as you do, and my dad's been there for 60 something. So I was born there and loved it and grew up there, and then went to boarding school in England, which has one effect of making sure that you want to leave the country pretty quickly. That's deeply unfair. But I mean, I had went to very good schools. I liked my schools. Don't get me wrong. Nothing wrong with the schools I went to. But if you associate one country in your head with school and another country in your head with home, it doesn't tend to create a warm, fuzzy feeling in your insides, even if it's entirely subconscious around that country. So the first thing I wanted to do when I got out of university was leave that country.
Got it.
I also studied Chinese because I was very good at languages. You know, I grew up in Hong Kong, but I never spoke Chinese, which is pathetic and sad and very colonialist and all these things. And so there was a bit of me that just had always wanted to learn Chinese. It was extraordinarily difficult, but I studied Chinese. And then I came out of university and I wanted to dance, but I also wanted to get out of the UK. I wanted to go to New York. I did go to New York a couple of times. I realized that getting a visa in New York was going to be impossible.
Oh boy.
So I'd always loved France. So I was like, I'm going to go to Paris and see what happens.
With all that globetrotting, you wind up in Alameda and you go, okay, this is the place.
My husband is why I'm here. My husband is in tech. Very simple, boring, was working for an American startup company, and they wanted to move him from London to the SF. But we had 3 days at the time. So we had 2 small children. And we left my children with my mum. We had 3 days to come to the Bay Area and find a house and 2 schools, because they were different ages, anywhere in the Bay Area. I mean, in 3 days. Right. And that was a ridiculous idea. I had a friend, the only person I knew who was at university with me, who was living in SF and very sweetly put us up. And she had basically said to me, you can't afford SF. And all the artists went east. So try east. So the 3 days that we had, we spent 1 day in San Francisco, because, Butthead would try at least, and 1 day in Oakland. And then somebody in Pablo's office who he hardly knew, but just happened to be somebody who'd come across, had said, Alameda's great for families. So we did 1 day in Alameda. The 1 day we did in Alameda, we happened to find a house that we're actually in Bay Farm at the time. It was right by the water, which is like the obsession of my life. When my husband said to me, will you move to San Francisco? I was like, if you can get me beside the ocean, I'll go anywhere you like.
Got it.
It was right by the ocean. And then it was like walkable to Bay Farm School. Like you didn't even have to cross the street.
Oh, perfect.
So I was sitting there looking out at the sea, thinking this is glorious. I really have never lived outside of the center of very, very, very large cities. Like, I didn't know how to drive when we moved here. There was no reason to drive in my life. Totally pointless. And I was just thinking, can I do this? I don't know. If we hate it, we'll leave, I guess. And so we went straight London to Alameda, which is a very unusual move. But I often say, and I think it's true, like if I'd ended up in San Francisco, would I have stayed? I think Alameda is a big bit of why we've stayed.
And I agree with this. My listeners have heard many times in 2022, I came to Alameda for a year. What are your favorite arts events to just attend?
So funny truth.
Okay.
I'm not really big into big events.
Okay.
Despite the fact that we run huge events, which I find deeply stressful. So smaller, like, the $6,000 blues, 6,000 person blues. I'd go and I'd enjoy it, but I'd go and see dance if you give me half a chance.
Okay.
And I wish that theatre tickets in the Bay Area were a little bit less expensive. There's always that thing where, especially as a parent, and most of the parents will understand this, there's like limited opportunities to do a thing.
Right.
To have a night out. And I was like, I should do all these things. Like I would go to the theatre and I would go to museums and I would do all these things. But if I'm going to choose one, I'll probably go and see some dance. And then there's not enough time to do everything else. I think I would always choose the day at a museum quietly myself, or, going to see a piece of theatre that I really, really want to see, or a piece of dance even more, over the big festivals.
Now, here's a related question.
Yeah.
And remember that this is coming from someone who reads comic books and thoroughly enjoys hair metal.
Okay.
What is your guilty entertainment pleasure? The one that, as the dancer and creator of wonderfully thought-provoking pieces, you go, I can't defend this, but I like it.
Probably Disney movies and maybe Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter, because it's just you can never go wrong with Harry Potter. And the kids want to, and you want to, and everybody's happy, and the world has gone quiet, and you're just watching or reading, to be fair, Harry Potter again.
Wonderful. What's an event that we just put on that you may have been skeptical of, and at the end of it you went, hey, that worked?
Probably the most sort of out there in my head in terms of what it was going to be was pulling together art of St. Quentin.
Okay.
I can't even remember how I came to it. I think I was inspired by a dancer that I know who was working a lot with an inmate on death row at St. Quentin. I was interested in doing something with it, and I Googled it, and it turned out that there was this collection of artwork that was all from artists on death row. I didn't really know how we were going to share this with the public, but it seemed like a really good idea. We also don't actually have any kind of exhibit space on the island, so we ended up putting these pictures partly in what we called the Healing Garden at the time, is now called Webster Park, but partly outdoors, partly in various different companies up and down Webster Street. There was a bit in Fireside, and there was a bit, they were kind of up spotted around the street. And then I, brought it together with an evening where there were dance performances in one of the karate studios up there, and there was a poetry reading in Calafia. And it was this really kind of like, I don't know how this is going to, maybe this will all come together. And it sort of did, and it was sort of magical. The one thing I would say that I learned from it, one of the things I said was, we'll just do this as a small event. The people at Rhythmics, who I work with all the time and who are really good friends, are always taking the piss out of me. Sorry, that may be a very British thing to say, but because they say you can't do anything small, like everything you do becomes huge. But I realized with Art of St. Quentin that it's just as much work putting together a small event, especially if you're, as I am generally. The events that I'm passionate about involve a real artistic input on my part.
Okay.
Like, I enjoy blues.
Right.
It's great. Once you program the lineup, it's pure logistics. It is literally event management. And if there's one thing that I've had said to me so many times, like, you're such a great event manager. I am not an event manager. That is not what I do. So give me something where I can actually get into the juicy, like, how am I going to bring these artists together? What's the string going to be? Like, how am I trying to take people on the journey of understanding how these things come together through the art and through the, messaging and all these things. So that was a really fun one to do. Actually, the amount of work that goes into doing that, you kind of need to do it on a scale when you're going to bring lots of people through it. Otherwise, it just kind of doesn't make sense anymore. There's so much work that goes into it. And then it's like, oh, and 150 people came through. And we're done.
To review the big events on this year's calendar, you've got Ocean Photography of the Year opening up for the public on the 24th of April.
Exactly.
And then Blues, Brews, and Barbecues on the 20th of September.
Exactly. It is always the third Sunday in September. Easy one to remember. And then we're actually going to bring back two events that we started last year
Okay.
that were kind of, in some ways, desperate fundraising ideas because there was a lot of desperate fundraising, but they were both really popular as well as fundraising ideas, which we still need to desperately push. One was we had a benefit concert in Fireside where we had a group of local musicians come together and play in support of us. So they
Wonderful.
were, raising money for us. And then the other was a silent art auction, which we actually did in Saltbreaker. Talking of, that is an opportunity for all kinds of local artists to donate artwork, which we auction off. A bit of me when I first came up with those things, it was very much about, are we going to survive the year?
Right.
Maybe we survive the year. There's been a lot of that reality going on over the last couple of years. But I also realized in doing them actually that we had more artwork than we could accept last time.
Okay.
And the artists were obviously excited to have that as a platform to show their work. The musicians were also really, really excited to be in this kind of context and, great public opportunity for local musicians. So I realized that they work both ways. They are helpful for us. They're a wonderful opportunity for local artists to support the work we do and also for us to be a platform for the work they do. So we're bringing back both of those things. The benefit concert will be in August and the auction will come back in October. So that's kind of the big ones. And we also have been running and will come back to what we're calling the weed salons, which are generally hosted in the houses of our board members / friends of the organization. And we focus on the work of like one art group. So it might be like a musician or a painter. It can kind of be anything.
Sure.
And we generally limit attendance to 30 people because we're in a house, but it's still free and it tends to be a Sunday afternoon. And it's a really nice opportunity. We sort of realized that, on the blues scale events, we don't actually get to interact. I mean, don't talk to me. Please don't talk to me during blues. I kind of start the stress about 6 a.m. I may be de-stressing by about 3 a.m. the next morning. Just don't try and get a, intelligible word out of me.
As I have said at Thumb's theatrical productions that I've directed, I've said, if you met me on opening night, you'd hate me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not there to be spoken to at this moment. Whereas the salons are a moment when, us as a group, we're actually able to interact with people. And so we learn a little bit more about the community and we can hear back from them and we can also integrate people into what we're doing. We started that last year and we maybe did 3 or 4 of them last year. We've done 1 this year. We'll probably do another 3 or 4. So those are kind of smaller things that we can do with less organization and a bit more of an opportunity for us to kind of really grow roots.
Here's the question I warned you about.
Go on then.
You have company coming in from out of town. You have to take them to 3 meals in Alameda. Where are you going?
The definition of meal, I'm running a little bit loose with, but that's fine. Number 1, we can say Saltbreaker, which obviously came back in this conversation, and as you mentioned, has probably come up as a favorite, but it would have been my favorite too. So number 1, Saltbreaker. Number 2 is probably also a favorite. Like Trabocco has just a wonderful atmosphere. Yep. You can't get away from his incredible enthusiasm and Italian-ness. And number 3 would be Julie's, which, I mean, to be fair, other people go there for meals. Right. I just go there for scones.
It's delightful, yes.
Realistically, if I was taking anyone, I would only probably give them a scone. But you can eat all kinds of wonderful, delicious things in Julie's. But I would have a scone every time.
Website, socials, way people can keep up with what you're doing.
So that whole West End Arts District thing that we were talking about and how long it is, as long as you've got that down, you've got everything. So westendartsdistrict.org and then hashtag West End Arts District on all the socials. Okay. As long as you can remember the ridiculously long name. The bonus is that it's only us with that ridiculously long name. So
very good. Tara Pilbrow, the Executive Director of the West End Arts District. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you. It was fun.
Take care. Thanks again to Tara Pilbrow, the Executive Director of the West End Arts District, for spending time with us this morning here on the Alameda Connection. To keep up with West End Arts District online, you can head to their website. As Tara noted, it's a bit long, westendartsdistrict.org. That's westendartsdistrict.org. Remember that spelling because that's also how you'll find them on Instagram and on Facebook. You won't want to miss the Ocean Photographer of the Year exhibit. That opens up to the general public on April 24th out on Alameda Point. That is a paid ticketed event. If you're listening to this program on the initial broadcast on KCSM HD2, you still have time to get discounted tickets. Head to the West End Arts District website, follow the links, and you'll get 20% off. That deal is good before April 1st. The exhibition will run weekends, with the final day being May 17th. Don't forget to mark your calendars for Saturday, September 20th. That's the latest installation of Blues, Brews, and Barbecue at Washington Park. Coming up next week on the Alameda Connection, we're going to stay with the arts in the West End. My guest will be Jean Kahane, Alameda's former poet laureate and the artistic director and founder of the Food Bank Players. Since 2021, the Food Bank Players have been presenting classic theater with a twist, all to benefit the Alameda Food Bank. That's Gene Kahane of the Food Bank Players next week on the Alameda Connection. Don't forget, you can follow the show on Instagram. Just search Alameda Connection. And if you have an idea for an upcoming guest, send me an email, alamedaconnection@gmail.com. Thanks as always to the California Historical Radio Society for providing our interview location for this week's conversation with Tara Pilbrow. Don't forget, they're open Wednesdays and Saturdays from 10 until 3. As we do every week, a big thank you to guitarist Bill Hart. He provides our theme music. The song is called Beachside Isle, and it's from his album Watch the Sky. I'm Scott Piehler. Catch you next Sunday morning, 8 a.m. on KCSM HD2 for the Alameda Connection.